This is the 18th season of Bass Talk Live. With your host, Matt Pangrath. BTL is brought to you by Lowrance, Bass Cat Boats, AFCO, Ducket Fishing, Strike King Lures, Sunline, Big Bite Baits, Spro, X-Zone Lures, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, and Pro Guide Batteries.
BTL, coming at you!
Good morning. It is Monday, January 17th, 2022, and this is Bass Talk Live. I gotta be honest, usually I try to open the show with just some breaking news, something that's going on in the industry, people that are announcing things, tournament goings-ons, things that are happening, and I kind of went back and looked through the archives from the past years and everything, and this is what I would call the doldrums week in professional bass fishing. Now, sometimes you will have a season that will open up in January. I know the pro circuit has been notorious for doing this at the end of the year, and there's a couple events that are a couple weeks out, but right now is everyone's kind of got their nose to the grindstone. You got guys that are getting their boats ready, guys that are finalizing their wraps, their sponsors, getting all their equipment in, getting ready to hit the road, and it's just kind of one of those weeks, probably the quietest week that we will have in the world of professional bass fishing going through the 2022 season. We have a great show today, though. Gentleman who made an announcement. I think Mike announced this maybe 4 or 5 days ago. It was kind of in the works. If you followed his social media, you recognize that the man had a lot of ice cream, a lot of milkshakes, a lot of, I think those are called confections? Is that what that's called, Mike? Sweets, treats, something. I'm looking at him back in the behind stage in the studio, but a big non-endemic sponsorship deal for Mike McClellan with Andy's Frozen Custard. So we're going to get him in to talk about that, but also going to kind of go down memory lane. That guy has been probably one of the most underrated anglers when we talk about bringing major non-endemics into the sport. He has a long list of non-endemic sponsors that he's partnered with over the years. So we'll talk about that. Also going to get into a little bit of bait design, go down the rock crawler and the McStick path, but I want to do it a little bit differently. Instead of, hey, when do you throw it here? When do you throw it there? We might be able to fit in a couple of those questions. I want to go back to the start of that and maybe kind of get his take on this whole evolution of how he has become synonymous with several different baits. Tomorrow on the show, Jimmy Washam, 2021 Pro Circuit title champ. I remember we had him on when he was like, yeah, I think I'm going to quit the job and go at this full time, and then he wins $200,000 in the title on the Mississippi River last year, starting the year off strong. And then I got a DM in the Instagram from Brandon Burks. And I don't know this guy. He said he listens to BTL. Seems legit. Did a little research on him. He's caught some big fish out of there. But he said, hey, man, a couple days ago, I think I caught the pending world record meanmouth out of a lake in Texas. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, they got to go through, I think they have to make sure it biologically is and all this. But I was like, I don't think we've ever had a world record holder on BTL before. So I said, you want to jump on BTL Tuesday morning and talk about it? He said, absolutely. So Brandon Burks, the pending world record meanmouth that came out of Texas a couple days ago, 8.36 pounds. I think it shattered it. Now, like I said, we'll have to ask him what pending means. I mean, it's not like all the way through. I know there's a ton of paperwork and all that stuff you have to do. So we'll have him on before Jimmy Washam. And then, yes, that's what we got on tap for tomorrow. Before we bring Mike in, I want to just kind of draw attention to something that Gene Gilliland posted on the Bassmaster website over the weekend, and it was the top 5 threats to the future of bass fishing. And this is one of those articles that everybody needs to read and nobody just gets super excited about because it is putting in the legwork, the flashy side of the industry, of the business that allows all of us who like to go fishing and care about our fisheries to continue to do that. So I'll just encourage everybody to go check it out. I'll run it over real quick. Gene Gilliland said this, you need to know about these threats and getting involved in finding solutions. Number 1 is water policy. So the real issues are who owns the water and who can use it. I remember that kind of issues we've had between the Louisiana and what is and isn't, and up in New York, and if it's man dug and not. Number 2 is invasive species. We've all seen what the Asian carp have done on the TVA, just for an example. Number 3 is loss of access. Number 4 is pollution and habitat loss. And number 5 is apathy and indifference. So a couple links there to the conservation page, conservation Facebook group. Like I said, I know this stuff isn't exciting. You don't get up in the morning and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to jump online and look at water policy or invasive species. You want to go to Tackle Warehouse and look at lures and things like that, but you have a reason to throw those lures because people like Gene and the like care about this stuff. So, all right, let's bring in our guest for today. What's up, Mike?
Not a whole lot, Matt. What are you up to today?
Oh, not much. Just kicking off the 3rd week of solo shows for BTL, and I noticed when I was doing just gathering a few stats for today's show. Now, I know you'd sold your house a couple years ago and then moved, and it appears you're either somewhere else or you are in your new house. Is this your new residence?
Yeah,
okay. You're in a town that I had never heard of, but you have a really cool name to your town. It's Blue Eye, Missouri.
Well, yeah. What's wrong with Blue Eye, Missouri? It's just one of those quaint little Ozark towns that I don't even know if the population's over 1,000, and it's one of the most scenic areas on the lake, though, that nobody knows about.
So you are on Table Rock.
The south side of Table Rock, yeah. We basically sit just across the lake from State Park. We're kind of nestled between State Park and Big Cedar on the south side of the lake. So when I look out my office window, as I'm doing right now, I'm looking at snow-covered hillsides overlooking State Park and Old 86 Campground is what I'm looking at as I sit here and talk to you.
Same general portion of the lake that James Watson lives in.
Yeah, I'm a little bit farther south, and I guess you would say south and east a little bit more than James is. James is more down in the Kimberling City area, okay. And I would be down in what's considered the Long Creek or the south end of the lake, the dam area.
Do you have an outdoor hot tub like
James? Don't have an outdoor hot tub, just a nice jacuzzi with a big window looking out over the woods here in the Ozarks. But we do have a nice back deck that we can enjoy the view of the lake from and all the snow that we have on the ground right now.
You've been there how long? Since it's been completely done?
4 years, yeah. We're essentially done. We cleared a little bit more timber this fall. After the season ended and opened up our view a little bit better to the lake, but we essentially are settled in, I guess you would say.
Dream house?
I would definitely say this is our last home, our resting place. When the economy went crazy this last year and everybody's selling for the astronomical numbers, we kind of thought about maybe throwing it on the market and just seeing what it would bring. But then I really got to thinking it'd be hard to replace what we have right now. So I think we're just going to stay put.
Because you guys were kind of in the RV for a year or two there, weren't you? For the majority of your time, you didn't really have, your home was the RV for a while.
We spent almost 2 years, 18 months in the RV while we were between selling our home in Northwest Arkansas and actually getting this one built. And honestly, we actually spend even the last couple years on the road. We've spent more time in our RV than we actually spend at home. So it wouldn't be completely beside ourselves to go RVing again, but we do enjoy the home base aspect. It's a great place to have family, friends, get-togethers. I mean, we've had a lot of anglers passing through that stop and stay with us from time to time. It's just a cool place. Friends that have given me places to stay over the years as we've traveled around the country, they've got a place now to come hang out and see what the Ozarks has to offer.
You have one one item on your wall behind you. Did you I said, what was that when you logged in? Mark Jeffries actually like framed that and gave that to you?
Yeah, Mark Jeffries has always. That's one thing I'll say about Mark. I mean, he's had such a finger on this industry, and just a caring person. And every time I made a cover, or every time there was something big that came out, that is actually the Toyota like
Bonus
father
bucks?
like son ad they did with myself and my son Justin when he first kind of hit the tournament scene and had some success and won some Toyota bonus bucks. So we actually did an ad with Toyota. So yeah, it's just cool to have these little mementos of memories of Mark Jeffries as much as anything. I mean, they mean a lot to me, but the fact that Mark Jeffries did them for me is even cooler.
See, I need to start doing that. I'm finding out all these little things that he did in the industry and
yeah, you're gonna have to get to work
doing it. And I'm like, he was doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes that he wasn't mentioning to anybody. That I'm gonna have to kind of learn the ropes.
Indeed.
Speaking of the fishing with your son Justin, there, you guys went out and put the hurting on the crappie the other day, didn't you?
Well, we sure did. I tell you what, it's. I think I had a few comments even on my Facebook that live scope is as close to cheating as you can possibly get, and that's pretty much the way I felt about it the other day. We actually had to fish 2 different creeks before we finally found them. But when we finally found them with Garmin Live Scope, Matt, it was so insane. We chased, I don't know if it was the same school of crappie or if it was numerous schools of crappie that were just suspended out over 40 to 70 feet of water. They were out over the creek channel, not even relating to trees. Occasionally you would see some bait, but we literally chased schools of crappie around, and they weren't very deep. I mean, 8 to 15 feet deep around with live scope, and caught probably 50 or more keepers. We only kept our limit of 30, but it was incredible just the action and how effective live scope is. I mean, we were throwing our baits 80 feet, watching our baits fall into the school of crappie. And as soon as you got it inside the school of crappie, you were going to catch one. It was just a matter of staying with them.
Black crappie, right? They look like black crappie.
We had a few black and white crappie. I mean, I've always been kind of a little bit confused by that. Sometimes, I've had people in years past try to tell me, oh, they're all the same. It's just the watercolor. But some of these were really kind of hard to distinguish if they truly were, black or white crappie. I mean, some of them were relatively dark, but not as dark as some of the black crappie I've caught. But some of the white ones were, really, really pale. So, but there was a mixture of both.
Obviously want to get into the logo that is on your new hat that you're sporting there. But before I brought you in, I mentioned an article that Gene Gilliland, he's a Hall of Fame fisheries biologist, actually works with bass. Now you've known Gene for ages there too. Yeah. But he came out with the five threats to the future of bass fishing, and I mentioned those in the first segment. And I thought I'd ask you because as an angler, and you have been a professional angler since the mid 1990s, do you think even amongst professional bass anglers who do this for a living, who rely on access to these areas and ramps and clean water and see the impact of invasive species, that this type of stuff is under talked about amongst your group? Do you guys sit around and talk about it, or is it something that only when you see an issue like we had on the TVA with the jumping carp, where you can visually say, oh, that's a problem? Or you go to a Sabine River and say, well, you can't go on that whole side because that's considered private. That's a problem. But as a whole, do you think that there's not enough professional anglers who really take a vested interest in the threats to the fisheries and bass fishing?
I wouldn't say that there's none of us that take an interest or an objective or, a stance on these things. I think a lot of it is, Matt, is unless we are actually competing in areas that are affected by this, it loses its sense of urgency a little bit. I mean, we all have a strong feeling about these things and want to be as involved as we can. In fact, when you just talk about access, I mean, Table Rock Lake has some great launch ramp facilities around the lake. But right now, myself and a good friend of mine, Kelly Power, we've been talking to the Corps and the chambers, and Kelly even has meetings, set up with higher officials about trying to get a tournament facility launch ramp built here at Table Rock. You go to some of these other states, Alabama and Texas, and they've got these massive launch ramps that are capable of having big tournaments at, and Table Rock really doesn't have one facility that is just what you would consider a tournament specialty ramp. So yeah, there's anglers all around the country that I think are working toward objectives like this all the time. The deal in Louisiana has always been a really tough situation because there is so much water in Louisiana that truly could be considered private water the way the laws read down there. And it's it's a shame when you get down in there and you start wanting to venture back into areas and know that you can't go to them. And, some of that even plays into some of these lakes that have creeks that wind up into private property. I mean, I've heard that landowners have tried to keep people from going through their property, on some of these bigger creeks that flow into our lakes around here. But fortunately, it seems like we've pretty well held to the laws that you can pass through on water as long as you don't step foot on land. So, it's definitely concerns. And, we've got a lot of, I've got my kids that are all still active in the outdoors, and hopefully grandkids one of these days that will have the opportunity to enjoy everything that we've enjoyed.
All right. So how'd you get a frozen custard company to say, you know what space I want to be in? I want to be in that professional bass fishing space with Mike McClellan.
So much of what goes on in this industry, and I'm not going to sit here and say that, my selling ability is that much better than these other anglers. I've been very fortunate to have some really cool non-endemic sponsors throughout the course of my career. And a lot of it boils back to relationships and cultivating relationships outside the industry. The whole thing with Andy's, to me, Andy's has always been a company that I've had in the back of my mind, just due to the fact that it basically started here in the Ozarks. I mean, I remember when I was graduating high school back in 1986, these Andy's frozen custard shops were starting to pop up around here. And early on in my career, I remember, man, wouldn't it be cool to have Andy's as a sponsor? And at that point, I didn't have any credibility, didn't have any credentials. You're talking 35 years ago. But as time has gone on and this industry's grown and Andy's has grown, there's a factor here that really just came to play. As I said, I've had other sponsorships with non-endemics, Hefty for a while, Tahoe for a while. Geico has been, a 7 or 8 year running sponsorship. And the new CEO at Geico this year decided they were going to kind of go in some different directions. And we had a great relationship, a great partnership for a number of years, but they decided to go a different direction. And it gave me the opportunity to reach out to a childhood friend of mine that is now a franchisee with Andy's. In fact, one of their largest franchisees, Eric Reed, and partner Josh. And they actually, I sat down, had a meeting with them. Eric and I go back a long ways. Our dads were actually in the paint business together back in the late 70s and early 80s.
Really?
And so Eric and I used to, run around Silver Dollar City and Branson and Whitewater together as kids. And, my career went one way into professional fishing, and his career went into the frozen custard world as a franchisee. And it just seemed like a good fit. I mean, Andy's has corporately has, got some relationships in NASCAR. They have started doing other sponsorships, and everything just felt right to put this deal together. We're going to be traveling to, I think, more than half of the states this year that Andy's Frozen Custard has locations in. They've got locations in Orlando, Florida, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Dallas, all over, but Andy's is represented in 15 states. And I think we're going to be in more than half of those states this year. We're going to do some meet and greets on site at some of the Andy's. We're actually, Andy's has stepped up, and we're giving 5 free frozen custard for a year treat cards out to individuals that will go to my website and listen to the video. There is a link to sign up for the Andy's Yum Squad. And once you sign up to the Yum Squad, you can have an opportunity to win free frozen custard for a year. So, essentially it's about cultivating, the people within the fishing industry. I mean, one thing about it, we all fish because we love to do it. It's fun. Some of us do it for a living, but when it comes down to the fact that when people go eat frozen custard, it's because it's fun. It's because they just want to kick back, be a kid again, take your kids to a location, have a sweet treat, and enjoy life for a little bit. And to me, fishing, frozen custard, and family all just kind of run together. And I think this is going to be a great way to drive the fans of our sport to get more acquainted with the Andy's Frozen Custard franchise.
All right, Mike, I have two questions for you about this. I'm going to put you on the spot on the first one. You can't get upset at me at this because I think it's 50-50 on whether you know the answer to this. But you obviously have in-depth knowledge of the Andy's Frozen Custard, so I think there's a chance you might get this. Educate me here, Mike. What is the difference between custard, ice cream, and yogurt? I don't know. I wasn't planning on this, but I know what's the difference?
It's trade secrets is the difference. And one of the big trade secrets of the frozen custard world, especially with Andy's, is they are actually churning frozen custard fresh hourly. You're not going and buying product that's been made the night before or something like that. The other thing is some of the contents that go into frozen custard. And I've already had this discussion with
I promise you I was not setting you up for a frozen custard deal here. This is all off the cuff. I could see Mike was getting a little squirmish before the question came
I'm
out.
not squirmish, but frozen custard is actually churned much slower, so it has less air than ice cream, and there's a lot of differences. And it doesn't have as much, I guess you would say, cream or lactose implications as ice cream does as well.
Okay, fair enough. Second question.
Is that fair enough?
Yeah, no, that's a great question.
Okay.
A great answer. I think it's a great question too. Secondly, I am on their menu that I pulled up while you were talking, and I do see here that they offer freshly brewed iced tea in both sweet, unsweetened raspberry. Have you had a chance to get that famous tumbler filled with their tea, and what are your thoughts on Andy's sweet tea, and how are you going to keep that in your boat at all times for the 1.5 gallons that you drink a day during every competition on the BPT and the pro circuit?
I'm going to admit right off the bat, you know how much I drink tea, and I've always got my gallon container with me. So I'm going to be honest, Matt, I have not even ordered an iced tea at an Andy's because my focus when I go to an Andy's is all about the treat. It's so many opportunities to get something sweet. I'm not worried about tea at that point. I drink unsweet iced tea. I've always got it, but it is very cool to know that
you signed a deal and with a company that sells tea, and you have not tried the tea yet.
Well, it's just the fact that, Matt, I've always got tea with me. I'm going to be drinking the Andy's tea as well.
Okay. Well, you need to check back in once you've had a chance to test the Andy's tea out.
We definitely will.
That's surprising to me. I'm somewhat disappointed.
It's really not that I've never had it. It's just since announcing the sponsorship, it's just nothing that's jumped out as urgent to me because it's all about the frozen custard right now.
Is that tea right there?
As I drink my unsweet iced tea.
You mentioned one thing when you talked about it. You talked about the relationships and how the relationships go past in your kind of line of non-endemics. As you've kind of navigated this industry and made a heck of a career out of it, aside from the over $2 million in tournament earnings, have you found that most of those non-endemics have gone back to a relationship that you've had in the past that you've just kind of kept going or that is cultivated, or any of these? Like you said, you mentioned the Tahoe, the Hefty, the Geico, or any of these like cold calls where you literally just have a resume and you send it to the ad agency for this company and they come back and say, yep, that's a space we want to be in? Or is this a lot of relationship based agreements that kind of build over time?
I think it all falls back to relationships, Mac. And I'm not going to say that a cold call never comes through. None of my non-endemic sponsorships have been cold calls. It has either been through an introduction of, somebody that knows somebody very well or somebody that I have met. I guess we'll just kind of go back and play it out as time went on. The Hefty deal was surely a fact of my son Justin working in a tackle store there in Northwest Arkansas. Met a gentleman through the course of working there that was really getting into bass fishing. He had been a motocrosser, had done a lot of different things. And Chris Smith was the gentleman's name. Loved to fish, and we started fishing together a little bit, and just talking about the fact that, man, wouldn't it be cool to see Hefty on the side of a boat? And before you knew it, one day he finally asked, well, what would it take to get Hefty on the side of a boat? And I hit him with a proposal. And that was back in the days of the elites kind of first kicking off, a lot of new TV coverage that we had never seen in the sport. So everything just kind of fell into place. And then, you look through the years of Hefty, and we moved into an era where Cabela's was getting very aggressive with professional anglers. And Cabela's, I think myself, Jeff Creed, David Walker, a number of us, got to deal with the Cabela's stores as a team. And Geico actually became part of that partnership with Cabela's. However, cultivating the relationship, we first met the gentleman that put the Geico program together with Cabela's at TTBC one year. Okay. And, myself, my wife, and David, and some of the other anglers that were associated with Geico got to spend a lot of time and develop a one-on-one relationship with the gentleman, that developed the fishing team. He actually moved on and had a lot to do with Geico's race sponsorships. And, that deal rode out for a number of years. And then you start seeing some of these people move on to other locations, different jobs. And that's when the Geico deal really started kind of, breaking down a little bit. We lost our connection and had to cultivate some new relationships. But again, it goes back to the relationships. I think the biggest thing that a lot of anglers fail to do is really think about the relationships that they have with people that are involved in the non-endemic world. I think there's a lot of opportunity here if you will just ever get the question in front of those folks, what it does actually take to be involved in this space.
Is that something that you've consciously done, is tried to make sure that your that your title sponsor is a non-endemic? Is it harder to work in that endemic space where you have a lot more people that are going for that same dollar, and it's easy, not easier, but as long as you have the wherewithal and business savvy to work outside of that space and then bring your endemics along around a non-endemic?
That really has been my goal since the Hefty deal came together. Mm-hmm. And, even before the Hefty partnership, I had always tried to figure out how to get some non-endemics involved. I mean, I had actually, put in proposals to a lot of fast food chains, a variety of different non-endemics through the years prior to, landing that first partnership with Hefty. So yeah, I really do put a lot of emphasis on trying to cultivate those non-endemics. And, even though they've kind of always been maybe looked at as my title, the thing that's cool is they've always worked very well with my other sponsorships, and my other sponsorships, the endemic companies, have always valued the fact that there is some cross branding and cross marketing that comes through those sponsorships. So, the fact that, Geico had such a large platform as far as customers and things like that, anytime I did anything for Geico, my endemic sponsors saw the benefit from that, because if Geico put something out that Mike McClellan was doing or involved in, it was reaching people that our typical endemic news might not ever reach. So there's a lot to be said for that as well. Just the cross branding and cross promoting opportunities that arise with these type of non-endemic sponsorships.
One more thing kind of along that lines, and I was looking for it online and I couldn't find anything, but I remember writing articles about it. I remember trying to find you on the water to shoot photographs of it. And was there a season where you actually had like a different jersey and a different wrap for a specific event during the year? It was almost like that NASCAR deal where you see guys that come in and they'll have a specific sponsor, but that's like, I remember at the time we were like, this is revolutionary. This is something that's going to take off. That's going to be. What was the story with that, and why did that never take off?
I really am kind of surprised that it never did take off, and I think I've got the answer to why it didn't take off, Matt. It was really kind of a cool situation. You know, I had the Hefty sponsorship for a few years. It was kind of in that midst of the elites really, you know, getting up off the ground, taking off. I was actually on the water I was cultivating a relationship with a possible sponsor. I was on the water with a gentleman that his family owned Tahoe Smokeless Tobacco Products. And he is wanting to talk about wrapping a boat. And I'm like trying to figure out how this could possibly be done, because I've already got, you know, everything done with Hefty, and he's wanting to come on as a, you know, more of a title sponsorship role. And as we are fishing and discussing this possibility, I get a phone call, and I'm talking about selling my previous year's boat to a gentleman on the phone. And I get off, and he's like, "You got 2 boats?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I've still got my boat from last year right now." I said, "I sure would like to get rid of it." And he's like, "Well, this is a perfect opportunity." He said, "Why don't I just wrap your other boat with our brand?" He said, "You can run it for the 1 or 2 tournaments that you are in my sales region, and do a separate jersey. You know, we'll still let, you know, Hefty be a part of the wrap and everything, but we'll just kind of mix it up for you." And that's kind of how that deal all came together. It was just somebody hearing me say I had 2 boats and coming up with the fact that let's just wrap this other boat. Now, I think it would have been difficult for guys to actually wrap and unwrap boats through the course of the season. But I really believe that this might have taken off a little bit more, but it was right before we really went through that economic crash, you know,
Right.
when everything just kind of came to a halt. So other than that, I think it's still a possibility that you could see more anglers start to do this a little bit. And I actually think you're starting to see this a little bit. I mean, you've got some anglers, especially some of the anglers that are more involved in TV, that actually don't necessarily have what you would call, I guess, very, very specific contracts. They're representing more than one crankbait company. They're representing more than, you know, one line company, or at least doing ads for different companies. So I think there may be something to be said for free agency a little bit as time goes on, even in the professional bass fishing space.
Was that a pain in the butt to do all those logistics? I mean, it would seem like if you had it to make it work, here's what I'm fishing. You have a guy who's at the top end of the sport, who's has enough sponsor dollars coming in to where you can have the 2 difference, and you have 2 identically rigged boats, kind of like what a John Cox did when he fished everything and had 2. So while one's getting wrapped, you have your manager, your person, whatever. You'd have to almost have a person to do this and tow it, and they would go get the other one ready, and then that, and you would basically either alternate or have the 2. Like it was very intriguing to me. Was it kind of a pain in the ass, or was it something that you were kind of excited to be like, I'll be the first guy to do this?
Well, I mean, you know, when it was all happening, I was excited as can be.
I remember it. It was cool.
And we had, you know, family that was excited. I mean, I think my dad pulled the boat a time or 2 to get it from one location to another.
Yeah.
There was all kinds of logistical things going on. But I mean, when you've got family that supports you the way my family has always supported me, you always figure out how to work around these things. And I mean, you know, you've met my dad, you've met my boys. Mm-hmm. I mean, my aunt and uncle, you know, helped me in years past. I mean, there's always been somebody there that has been willing to lend a helping hand, and the logistical part of it you can work out. I mean, it was exciting though, and I truly do believe, and I've even told some close friends of mine, you know, I think there's opportunities here that anglers really need to look outside the box a little bit more than they do.
Very cool. All right, we're gonna take a quick break here. When we come back, I want to talk like old school rock crawler, old school mixed stick stuff, not the standard. Hey, what pound test you're gonna throw it on? I want to go back to kind of the origins on how this thing developed. Because I mean, it was the wiggle wart, that was it, and then at some point you had to say, hey, I think I can do some stuff that's better than this, which is takes a different mind. But before we go on the break, your favorite Andy's frozen custard treat if someone's driving past an Andy's, even if it's cold out, and it's like, hey, you know what, in honor of Mike McClellan, I'm gonna stop and get something. What's your suggestion as we go to break?
Right now I'm pretty plain and simple. I mean, for me, banana, vanilla, malt, things like that come to life. But I will have to say, I had a jackhammer the other day, so I'm going to give a little shout out to my buddy Brett Height. Andy's does have a treat called a jackhammer.
It wasn't $17.99, was it?
Unbelievable. Do what, Matt?
It wasn't $17.99.
No, it isn't $17.99. It's
thank goodness.
Than B Height's jackhammer.
All right, we'll be back on a Monday BTL with Mike McClellan.
The Ultimate Fishing System by Lowrance. Your choice of powerful fish-finding tools, all connected. From sonar and trolling motor to navigation and networking. To fit the way you fish. All with touchscreen control from HDS Live, the heart of your system. Find more, see more, catch more with the Ultimate Fishing System by Lowrance. Upgrade to the Ultimate Fishing System and get up to $1,000 cash back.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
I've made my living on the water for over 20 years.
For 14 years.
For over 23 years.
I've worn a bunch of different clothing brands over the years.
Some companies big.
And some companies small.
All of them said they were making clothing for us.
But none of them knew us.
None of them were us.
Except for one.
Except for one.
Except one.
AFCO.
AFCO.
AFCO. AFCO.
Fishing isn't part of us. It is us.
The KVD 100 jerkbait. 15 different colors. A perfect combination of roll, wiggle, and flash. Increased castability. 3D eyes. Premium black nickel hooks. KVD. Tie one on. Striking lures.
So, you're looking to buy fishing electronics, huh? Are you also looking for true experts to help guide you through it? Well, at the Bass Tank, you've come to the right place. We are live forward-facing sonar pioneers with thousands of hours spent learning through winning trophies, cashing checks, and just having fun. Whatever brand you need, we have it. We offer free shipping, and we have 2 financing options available. Our experts are here to help you. Call us today or visit thebasstank.com.
Hey guys, Major League Fishing Pro Jacob Wheeler here with my new Signature Series line of rods with Ducket Fishing. We have my 7.2 cranking rod right here. Crankbaits can be very fickle, and having the right, having a lot of tip can be too much, and having not enough tip can, lose a lot of fish. So you really got to be careful. If there's 1 or 2 techniques that I'm really adamant about having the perfect action is a crankbait, especially like a square bill, a DT6, those medium running crankbaits in the springtime when those fish's mouth are pretty tough. That's when I'm really on top of having my actions just perfect.
Welcome back, BTL, on a Monday, talking with BPT professional pro circuit angler and six-time Elite Series champ. Is it 6 or
4-time
4?
elite, 8-time winner.
2 opens.
Yeah. Well,
6. That's
actually,
where I got this 6 from.
Yeah.
You won the one on Table Rock, the Open on Table Rock. I remember that. No, that was the Elite.
Yes, sir.
Or
The Open
too.
Championship. We won an Elite on Table Rock as well. 14 was the Elite.
Which was the one that
Open
was right by the Bass Pro Shop where the river was right there, and then it was like jam-packed with people as far as you could see? Which was that the Elite or the Open? That was the Elite?
That was the Elite.
Okay. And then the Open
the
Championship.
Open was actually, the Open weigh-in was there as well, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've won a lot, dude.
It's I've been blessed, Matt. I mean, it's just when it happens, and it's like there's nothing you can do to stop it, and that's the crazy part about it. I mean,
I'm just saying, you look at all the guys who have done it as long as you have done it. I mean, you are a grizzled veteran at this point for as many years as you have done it full time. I mean, look, you're in the house on the lake that you grew up in and learned how to fish on because of what you've been able to do with the rod and reel in your hand. But there's a lot who don't have 8 wins.
I will have to say, and I talk about that all the time. I mean, there's a lot of guys that make a career out of professional fishing that only win once or twice in their career. And to win 8 times in this sport, and that's just the national wins. You know, there's a few other wins throughout the course of my earlier career that were big stepping stones to get to where I've gotten to. But to win 8 times during the course of the 22 or 3 year career I've had, I feel very fortunate. I mean, there truly are only a handful of guys that have done that. And a couple of them are the younger guys that are coming on right now, you know.
When you look at the guys who have way more wins than you, like a Van Dam or one of those guys who have, 10, 12, a Denny Brower, something like that. Like, how impressive is that to someone who has won 8 times and know what it takes at all levels to see? I mean, does that seem like a different stratosphere to you, or is that just like, oh, I could have had that many, but the chips just felt different. Like I got rivered on a number of those, or is it really impressive?
No, it's really impressive. When you look at the fact that Kevin, now, granted, Kevin started a few years before I did, but what was it, 2 or 3 years before I started, I think. So the fact
91, 92, and you were like 95, 96?
Yeah, maybe late 90s, 97, 98, somewhere along in there. But I mean, to look at the fact that Kevin has won 25 plus times, I mean, that's astounding. Denny, I don't know exactly how many Denny has won, but it's unbelievable to think that those guys won that many events. And it's just to show that when they were winning, they were so much further ahead of everybody else at their craft or
17.
Their strength. They were so good at it during that phase of time that they just blew everybody out of the water. Denny and his flipping ability and his second nature to know where to look for those fish that nobody else was looking for. And just simply the fact that Kevin could cover more water than anybody else out there. And, whether it was catching them on a crankbait or a spinnerbait or whatever it was that Kevin won on, he just outfished everybody. So it's impressive to look at what those guys did with the number of wins that they've had. And there's a few others that you have to throw into that category with them as well.
Did you go through a period of your career where I don't mean this to put you in a box to where you sound cocky, but like you knew you were probably going to win one that year. You didn't know how or when, but you just knew at some point it's going to happen. Like, did it seem like it kind of flowed for you?
It really did. And it was that period, between 2005 and 2000, what was it? 2005, 6, 7, 8, until 2009. I never even questioned the fact that I wasn't going to walk away with another trophy. And trust me, when it happened in 2009, I think I drew one check in 2009 at the first event of the year and never drew another check the rest of the year. Dude, it was humbling. It was, and it wasn't that I didn't catch anything that year. It was like
I almost won the Classic that year.
Yeah. It was just like I always caught just enough to miss a check. And, I think every now and then somebody knocks on your door and says, hey, you got to remember what's important in life. And, this sport is humbling, but there are things that are more important in life than fishing. And every now and then you got to take a step back and keep those things in perspective. That's for sure.
All right. So what year were you like fishing a wigglewort down the bank and went, you know what I think I can do? I think I can make something that is better than this. That's had to be how it happened. There literally had to be a moment where you were like, oh, I am sponsored by a company that makes hard baits. This is a bait that everyone throws around here, and I think I can do it better.
It honestly happened very early on in my sponsorship with Spro. You know, we did the McStick series, and I was super excited about that. And, you know, the unique thing about Table Rock and some of these Ozark lakes is, you know, you'll have one year that the stick bait bite is off the charts, you know, and the wiggle wart bite wasn't so good. And then the next year, it's like the stick bait bite's just so, but the wiggle wart bite was unbelievable. And I really think that's kind of what happened when I developed the McStick series. And I think that would have been in the mid 2000s, 2005, 2006, somewhere along in there is when we really got serious about the McSticks. But somewhere in that later range of the 2000s, you know, 2010, 2012, I'm like, guys, can I do a bait, you know, that's similar to a wiggle wart? And we actually developed, if I'm not mistaken, the first prototype of a rock crawler was done in 2013, I believe. And these are some of the earlier versions that I've got here in my hand. And as you look at them, you can actually see that I'm having trouble finding my camera. Some of the bills
this is a new feature that we can do here.
And
boom, look at that. There you go.
So some of the bills were actually smaller. The body shapes were a little bit different. If you can look at these two baits, you can actually see that the bill on the one in this hand is smaller than the other.
But that's that's the same bait though. These are like 2013 models. Hold those up on the side too.
Yeah,
so those were like 13, 14 models of the higher.
Exactly. Now some of these, you know, got painted with special paint jobs to try to catch fish on them. Basically, was what we were trying to do. The actions were so, but I actually played with the bait from, you know, like 13 up until the year that we came here for the Bassmaster Elite Series. And I hate to say it, but it was either 14 or 15. I can't remember.
The one you won was 14.
Yeah, the one I won, 15?
14.
14. Okay. So that year was just one of those years that the crankbait bite was better than the jerkbait bite. Now, I caught fish on a jerkbait. Go ahead.
Is that because, like, something happened with the ground and like the crawfish were super active and we're having a great time in the fall, and all of a sudden there's more crawfish, and then other years like they're just not as active, they're not going to the club as much, and the shad are like partying, and then boom, there's tons of shad? I mean, seriously, like, are there more crawfish when they're biting a rock crawler?
Yes, and a big part of that is generally if you have a shad kill on this lake early in the spring, the dead shad float to the bottom or sink to the bottom, and the crawfish come out from the rocks to eat them. The fish eventually get tired of eating dying shad, and when those crawfish come out and start eating dead shad, that's when they really start eating a rock crawler.
So it's a combo deal. It's not just really like one thing. It's like you have to have the shad, and then the shad die, and then they gorge on the shad, and then there's fewer shad, but then the shad provides nutrients to the crawfish, and then the crawfish boom, and then there's more crawfish. So this whole thing starts with a crazy cold snap, and that leads to whether it's a shad year or a crawfish year on the Ozark Lakes in a roundabout way.
That is pretty much what dictates what happens on these lakes every year. It really is.
That is. How many people that fish Ozark Lakes do you think understand that little circle of life? I wish I had the Lion King circle of life music here.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, that's very basic, but it's very advanced at the same time.
Yeah, it's something you really got to pay attention to. And even certain sections of the lake will develop differently than other sections depending on how many shad die, how warm the water is, how cold the water is. There's a lot of things that have to be thought through.
Okay, sorry. So you're going into 14, and you said that was a crawfish year.
That was a crawfish year. So going into the event, I actually had a couple of these prototypes, and when I say a couple, I'm like I've got 3 or 4 different versions. And none of them are really just right. I try to paint a couple of them. In fact, that's probably the reason this bait right here is painted, trying to actually catch fish on these prototypes to hopefully strong arm Spro into giving me the opportunity to actually develop this bait. Because at this point, they had no desire to.
You talk to Spro. You say, hey, I think I want to make this crankbait. You're on their pro team. They're in the market business of designing baits, and they say, okay, so they say, what do you want? how does that process work to get to the prototypes is what I'm saying.
Well, in the initial part to get to the prototypes, I just rode them hard enough and we had enough success with the McStick that they were like willing to give it a try.
Okay.
But once we got to the prototype phase, they really didn't think that selling a rock crawler could really move the needle. I mean, I'm just being honest. They didn't realize how many rock crawlers we might potentially sell. But essentially what happened, Matt, was I did good in that, or I won that Elite Series here on Table Rock on a rock or on a wiggle wart and a McStick. More of the fish I caught came on a wiggle wart. And it's like, guys, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to lie about this.
Right.
I caught them on a wiggle wart. I'm going to be truthful to the media. I think you and I even talked about this when you called to interview me after the tournament. I'm like, I caught them on a wiggle wart, dude. Now there's no way I can hide it. And
I would have interviewed you in person there. That was back when Jeffries was in no-call interviews. I had to go to the person. Phone interviews were not allowed at that time with Mark Jeffries. Got to get that straight.
Yeah.
We were on location.
Well, then I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Brandon Polinick in the next year caught him really good in the Classic. I think almost.
And it was the year right before that. I think in 2013, wasn't it?
Maybe it was
the
right
one that Pace was.
So basically, there was enough interest inspired, and the fact that you couldn't get original wiggle warts anymore. It's like Spro finally was like, well, what would it take to build the perfect bait? So then I dig out my prototypes again, and I really start working on them. And, after going through 2 or 3 different bill shapes and designs, I finally landed on, what was the right one, and that was the original RK55. And the thing about this bait, when you asked earlier, what was it about wanting to build a bait that would do exactly what I wanted it to do? A wiggle wart was a phenomenal bait and still is a great bait. You can't get originals anymore. But the thing that I always wanted a bait to do, I wanted a bait to go deeper than what the original wiggle wart would go. I wanted a bait that was easier to cast. And it was like everybody that tried to develop a bait just tried to knock off the wiggle wart. And I wanted to truly develop a bait that had similar characteristics, but actually had more advantages built into the bait. And that's what we did when we came out with the original RK55. I mean, that was the gem. I mean, you're talking about a bait that is a very small profile bait that will dive 12 to 15 foot deep, depending on what pound test Sunline FC crank you put it on. And a bait that has the castability of this bait. I mean, you've thrown them, Matt. I mean, they throw so much better than any bait in its category. It's just everything you want in a bait to catch fish on these Ozark style lakes.
So when did you know you had it right? Like, how many iterations did you go through before you got one, Spro sent it to you, and you went, dude, this is it?
We probably went through 5 different prototypes and build designs, and even the consistency of the plastics has changed. I mean, when you look at this particular bait that I've got in my hand right now, you can see that the plastic is somewhat dull, and it's not real clear in comparison to this bait, which is an actual molded working bait. In fact, this is one of the new colors we've got right now, but this is Ghost Orange Craw. The plastics changed. The bill design itself changed. The thickness of the bill had to be worked on. And probably 5 or 6 different renditions before I finally said, okay, guys, this is the one we need to put into the production phase. And the thing that was really cool to me, Matt, is generally when you build a bait, you're always worried that when it goes from prototype to production, it may not be as good. And the thing about the rock crawler, the original 55, when we went from prototype to production, somehow the bait actually gained depth when we built the actual final version. The last version of a prototype I had, I felt like 13 was maximum that you would ever get the bait. And when we got the first original, I remember going out and throwing it on, at that time, it was probably a 10-pound Sunline Reaction. I got the bait hung up 2 or 3 times in like 14 foot of water, where I was using a pole that I had actually tape measured off 14 foot deep. And I'm like, man, this bait got better. So I was absolutely stoked by the fact that this bait is even going to be better and deeper than what I originally intended it to be.
Do you remember the first derby that you had a bunch, and instead of just having prototypes of your fishing, you just took them out of the Spro package and started fishing them and went, oh my gosh, this is my bait that I'm catching them on in a $100,000 derby?
Yeah, it's been, there's been a few, and as bad as I hate to say it, I can't credit, one of my wins since then to a rock crawler 100%, but I've definitely caught a lot of good ones, and a lot of fish that have earned me paychecks since the development of it. I know it's always frustrating, it's some of these guys, it seems like they develop a bait or they win on a bait and it's their bait. Kevin so many times has won on a bait that is one of his signature baits. Yeah. Dean is another great example. And for some reason, it's like I get texts and messages from guys all around the country that say, man, your bait was a big part of me winning that tournament, but it hasn't been me that could say my bait won me an event. Now, I will say the elite here on Table Rock, the McStick definitely played a big role in helping me win that tournament. And even the Open, that we had here in 17. I caught him on a swim bait, which was a signature swim bait, a McStick, and a rock crawler that year. So, yeah, there's been tournaments I've won that the bait has been a part of. But to say I won this tournament using this bait exclusively just hasn't happened for me yet.
Do you have I don't have any kids, so I don't know if this is a good example. I don't know if you have favorite children, but do you have favorite lures? Do you look at the McStick box and smile because maybe that was the first one, it's been around for 15, or do you have more of an affinity towards your rock crawlers? If you had to kind of compare and contrast the two as far as the baits that you've created, which one's your favorite? Sentimentally, not on the water, but you just have warm and fuzzies for one more than the other.
Probably, honestly, the McStick. I mean, I was so ate up with stick bait fishing as a kid and early on in my tournament career, and having the opportunity to work with Spro and develop a bait from start to finish. And that's the thing a lot of people may not understand about Spro, especially. I don't know if I can, talk to other bait companies about this, but I mean, from Spro's perspective, they don't just come out with a bait and send it to us and say, hey, what do you think about this? Do you want to put your name on it? Anything that Dean, myself, John, Russ, any of the Spro pros that have helped develop baits for Spro, it goes from the idea phase to the production phase from the angler. I mean, now, not to say that Spro's engineers don't help you with it, but it's okay, what do you want the bait to look like? You draw. And I tried to find my drawings. I hated that I couldn't find them today, but I would literally sit down and draw the image on a piece of graph paper.
You a good drawer?
Do what?
Are you a good drawer?
I actually am. I actually took, I thought I was going to be an architect is what I really thought I was going to be coming out of high school. I had architecture in school for, I guess, the last 3 years of high school. I actually had 2.5 or 3 hours of architecture every day. So I had some drawing ability. I understand, how you draw a bait to scale and all of those things. Really? So yeah, that was a big aspect in helping me design these baits for the company.
So you would, like you said, you would just sketch, you would draw out exactly how you wanted it.
The bait shape, everything. Yeah, to scale on a piece of graph paper where I was.
You gotta find those, Mike. How are those not up on your wall? You gotta have that on your wall next to you and Justin's bonus bucks ad.
You're right, and it's one of those deals through the move. You asked earlier if we were finished. We have basically finished almost everything here except what I guess I would consider my man cave or my trophy room game room. I'm missing one piece of the puzzle. I want to find a pool table that I really like. And once I get the pool table set in my man cave, then I'm going to finish with the shelving and everything. And the move was a big deal. When you box all of your stuff up and put it in a pod and you forget you have it for 3 or 4 years while you're building a house, it's kind of tough to find everything again. And I actually do recall running across my drawings just in the past, couple months, but I could not lay my hands on them this morning when I got ready to do the show.
What type of pool table are you in the market for? Our listener audience base is broad and very knowledgeable in a number of different things,
Are they?
including bowling. So is there a specific pool table that
You know,
you're in the
I
hunt
definitely think I want a Brunswick. I want one that's got the freestanding pockets. You know, I don't want the one that has the chase system or the ball. You know, I don't want a barroom pool table. Just something pretty simple. But you know, the ones I have over at Big Cedar at Uncle Buck's at Bass Pro, I really kind of like those tables. But I haven't found a Brunswick version that really kind of falls into that category. And, you know, I continue to look on, you know, Facebook Marketplace and look at, you know, billiards rooms every now and then, but I just haven't really found the right one.
So this is your jam. Like, you're good at billiards. Like,
I
if you
love
go
to
in, like, can you run? Is there a chance you could, like, run it? Have you ran a table before?
Oh, I've ran a table before.
Really?
In fact, I think 2 years ago at our little sales meeting conference we had, do you not remember the little pool bet that myself and one of the other sales reps got into?
I think that was when I was in the hot tub. That was when I was in the
You were
hot tub with the
Okay.
cigar when you guys did your pool bet.
Yeah, and
billiards
everybody
bet.
had Shepke picked as the winner, and I actually made a good run. I will have to say, I think I may have won by default. Shepke may have actually scratched on the 8-ball, but in the end, I won, and that was what the whole deal was. I'm just a competitor, Matt, and you know that. I mean, I love to play poker. Anything that puts me in a position where I can try to beat somebody at something, I'm all in, man.
To wrap up the kind of bait design stuff, it always seems to me like the litmus test of a successful bait is when they continue to add new versions, new colors, new tweaks to it. I mean, if it's just 6 colors and it comes out, I mean, chances are that thing didn't do really well. But when all of a sudden you're in 3-4 different sizes and they keep adding 3, 4, 5 colors every single year, I mean that bait's doing something, right?
It is, man. And I'm sitting here looking at the Spro catalog, the latest edition of the Spro catalog right here. See that? And when you look at, that's the McStick colors. There's almost 30 colors of McSticks. We've got, I think, the latest colors, new colors. And some of these actually haven't hit the market, so I can't necessarily.
You show them?
Oh, I can show them. I can't necessarily even talk about the names, but you know, this is going to be a new color coming just here in the next year. Some of the real color doesn't necessarily show through on my camera for some reason, but this is really going to be an awesome new color. Ghost Magic.
It's going to give off a lot of flash.
Yeah, Ghost Magic Purple was actually a new color for last year. We had PM Twilight, which was you talk about catch them on table rock, spots, smallmouth, and even some largemouth. They absolutely loved that bait last year on table rock. And then we had MCIU, and you can tell by the scars on that bait, it has definitely caught a few bass. So that's MCIU. And this year, one of the new colors is Matte Shad. It is kind of a matte colored bait, very translucent, a little bit of gray, purplish hue to the back. It's going to be a good one. And then we actually came out with a very realistic yellow perch looking bait. So we got a perch color bait this year for some of that up north smallmouth fishing. But yeah, new colors are coming constantly. And, you know, that's something that I work on as well as work closely with the reps. My son, Justin, reps for Spro, so it works very well to be able to stay in touch with him. Then when you talk rock crawlers, we have, and we've got, you know, different sizes as well. You know, we've got the original 55. We've got the little 50 now, the RK50, which is a shallower diving version of the original. This is actually one of the new colors. And we're reaching almost 30 colors in rock crawlers now too. We have a new olive craw color that's been a hit this year. In fact, if you'll go to Falcon's YouTube page and watch the technique series that I did on fall crank, and this is actually the bait that I caught the double on and caught the majority of the bass I caught. We have got the new Delta Craw that is going to be available in all of the rock crawlers. New Sparkle Shad, which is, we found that there's a lot of guys that throw this bait even as a shad replicate, not just a crawfish. And the sparkle shad's going to be a good one. And then we have even what we call goby. This is one of those colors that has a lot of what the natural goby colors look like. And if those guys haven't been throwing this bait up north on the Great Lakes, they better start throwing it because it will flat catch them on the Great Lakes.
Hey, you kind of mentioned it, and I wanted to. So I had my buddy Darren that drew you, boy, 7 years ago in an open as a co-angler.
Mm-hmm.
And after the day, this was my first year of ever fishing the opens, and he drew Mike McClellan. He's like, "Oh, my life is set. I got it. I got the number one draw at Table Rock." I'm like, "You lucky son of a gun." Well, he had practiced with me for 5 days, and afterwards he gets off the water. I said, "Well, how'd it go? What was it? Did he do so? Was it magic? Did he take you to secret spots? Are you sworn to secrecy?" And he's like, "Dude," he's like, he fished a lot of the same stuff you fished. He just did it better. He's like, "I'm not trying to be mean to you, but one of the things that I remember struck him was how you fish that rock crawler over cover, suspended cover, not like grinding it down into the rocks." He was like, he was bringing it. Is it okay if I tell you what he said you were doing?
You can talk.
He said he was bringing the rock crawler through the tops of the cedar trees. Mm-hmm. And he said it was where he goes, "You were totally missing those fish." He's like, "You're on top of it. You were on the bank. I was throwing a rock crawler. I was throwing the same baits, the wiggleworts," but he's like, it was amazing how he would take the rock crawler that you would assume would be in that, and you were fishing it for suspended fish in treetops, and it just blew his mind how you took a bait that everybody was doing one thing with that you designed and made famous, and were fishing it completely differently.
Yeah, and that's one of the big keys to fishing, not just this lake, but any lake that you get those scenarios and situations where fish suspend either in timber, brush piles, off the edge of ledges. Crankbait will catch them, suspended in a lot of situations, and that's what a lot of people miss. So many people put their boat up there in the depth that they want to fish, thinking that they need to be up there in less than 15 foot of water. And a lot of times when I throw a rock crawler, especially the original 55 on this lake, I keep the boat out in 18, 20, 25 foot of water because I'm trying to catch those fish that are suspended out off of those breaks, that are suspended in the treetops. And it's not like I'm throwing a crankbait over a treetop that's 4 feet under the surface. I'm trying to hit those treetops that are 12 to 15 foot deep. And I'm trying to hit the very tops of them and get fish to react to that crankbait as it comes through those tops. So it's just a different style of cranking that, I can't take full credit for. My buddy Kelly Power on this lake has taught me a lot about cranking them here over the years, and a good friend of mine that used to guide here for many years that passed a few years ago, Bill Beck. I know there's a lot of guys listening to this program that probably know Bill, and Bill and I spent so many hours cranking, not only my rock crawler, but previous crankbaits on this lake that you just learn a lot of these little key things that will catch fish from time to time.
Do you have 5 minutes to take a couple questions from the instant feedback, or you got to bounce?
Absolutely, man. I'm here.
All right. If you have a question for Mike McClellan heading into the 2022 season, jerkbait, McStick, rock crawler, anything related to that, go ahead and get those questions in. In the meantime, if you had to pick kind of a early spring,
this is a new secret bag of baits. You're not going to get a good look at them, but that's new prototypes in the works. That's one thing you mentioned earlier, Matt. We're always working on new stuff, and we've got 3 new baits in development right now with Spro. I've got a new rock crawler, a new different size, different depth diving version. We have 2 McSticks that we're working on currently that are going to be very much useful for the guys that are dialing in, catching fish on a stick bait, using forward-facing live scope Garmin technology, things like that. So we're never going to stop, man. We're going to keep developing new McSticks, new rock crawlers, as long as people keep catching fish on them.
Can you hold that bag up real quick for another
second? I can hold it up just for a second, but it's not going to last very long. I mean, there's new colors in there. There might be some different depth diving baits in there. It's just a bag of goodies that I recently got from Spro to start playing with.
All right. Here's a question. What is your favorite pre-spawn crank color, Mike, from Bass and Furious?
I have to say that I was somewhat hesitant for many, many years, but the last few years, it's really come to my attention that the red colors for pre-spawn fish on a lot of these clear water lakes, as well as some of the dirtier water lakes, red craw, delta craw, any of these baits that have red in them. The new delta craw I think is going to be an awesome one. I'm trying to actually get in my rock crawler box here to.
Can you show your rock crawler box?
Do what now?
Can you tilt up your rock crawler box? I'd be interested in seeing. Okay, so you use a deep.
Yeah, I use a deep
box.
I like to stack a lot of baits in there. You're going to lose them. I mean, that's just it. Red River Craw is a really good one. Red Craw is another one that I throw extensively in the spring. Red Bug, when you get into those situations where the water's got a little bit more color. The solid, red baits. And then, like I said, I think the Delta Craw is going to be good. And man, I've always got guys painting special colors for me. That's one thing about it. I've got buddies that are great painters, and I'm always throwing some new stuff in the mix. I think anytime you can throw a bait that's a little different color than what everybody else is throwing, you just increased your odds a little bit to catching a few more fish than somebody else.
Best water temperature for a rock crawler?
That is a really interesting question, because I think that's something that a lot of people really don't give a lot of thought to. They get dialed in on a temperature. When I grew up fishing this lake, my uncle was a guide here, and he had this scenario in his mind that he really didn't start fishing for bass until the water got to be 52 degrees. And the one thing that I have figured out, there are definitely water temperatures that you can say, man, they bite a rock crawler really good when the water temperature is from 48 to 52. But it's really not about what the water temperature is as much as it is about what the water temperature's done. Anytime you get a really good cold snap like we've had this week here in the Ozarks, I mean, we've had 6 inches of snow. I would say the water temperature has probably dropped down into the lower 40s. When we get that next warming trend, when we get 4 or 5 days of good warm weather and this lake temperature comes up 3, 4, 5 degrees in a short period of time, these fish are going to start biting a rock crawler. So it's more about a good, quick change in temperature in the upward progression in the spring. But then in the fall, it's just the opposite. When you start talking about catching them on a rock crawler here on Table Rock or other lakes in the area that are similar, when you get that first good cold snap and the water temperature plummets 6, 8 degrees, that's generally when fish get on a rock crawler in the fall. So it's really more about what the water temperature is doing than it is about a specific water temperature, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you this, because I've been meaning to ask you this because it bothers me. So we've had that. Well, it does. And I'm wondering if you ever run into this. We have that Derby in November, whenever we do the last couple years, and obviously you post a bunch. Oh, they're eating the rock crawler. Try to get everyone off of the deep bite.
Yeah.
There's Mike. But so I'll be practicing, and I'll have the red bug or whatever rock crawler tied on, and in the section of the lake that I like to fish, I'll cast it out, and this could go for any Clearwater lake across the country.
Yeah.
And I'll cast it out to the bank, and I'll watch that thing, and I'll be like, yep, there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'll watch the whole crankbait come back to the boat. I'll never lose sight of that thing. And now I'm in great area. I've run it past stubs. But I'll watch it from the start of the cast all the way back to the boat. And it just doesn't sit well with me. And I'll make 5 or 6 casts, and I'll be like, this is, it's happened on Beaver Lake before all the time. Any of those lakes that get super clear.
Yeah, you lay the rock crawler down.
Has there ever been a time where you catch them on a crankbait, specifically like a rock crawler style, on those lakes where you can watch, it's a visual bite with it? Or are you running where you're catching this to areas where you're not seeing that bait once it gets a couple feet down?
Well, the one thing I will say, yes, I have caught them. In fact, this really kind of brings up a moment when you ask that question of a really cool memory. The year Aaron Martins won, I believe he won the Angler of the Year title here on Table Rock in 2000. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it was one of those pre-spawn tournaments. Aaron didn't actually win the event. I believe Mark Davis won it, but it was a pre-spawn event where the lake had come up. There was certain sections of the lake that had dirty water, but down on the lower end, the water was really clear. And you literally could throw, at that time, it was a wiggle wart, but you could throw that wiggle wart out on these pea gravel chunk rock points and literally watch it all the way back. And just from nowhere, fish would come and get it. And I remember Aaron actually talking on stage about catching these fish on a wiggle wart that you would never dream of. I mean, in fact, it was this rendition. I don't remember what the actual color was called in, I think it was like a V38 or something in the wiggle wart color, but it was actually this bait that Aaron was throwing in clear water, catching those fish, and he could actually see them come get it. So yeah, it does happen at times. There are those days that fish are just feeding good, that they'll bite it in dead, slick, calm, clear conditions. But the big thing, Matt, that I do is I'm going to chase wind or I'm going to chase shade when it comes to fishing Table Rock when you don't have a lot of wind. And when I say chase wind, I'm talking about chasing the slightest ripple. And you've been on this lake enough to know that you can run one section of this lake and think there's not a breath of wind blowing anywhere. And then you make a corner and all of a sudden you've got a ripple or you've got a good breeze. And that's the keys to catching them good on that bait any time of the year for me is chasing wind or chasing shade. You know, in the spring and the fall, you have many more shade, you know, being thrown because of the angle of the sun. So you get more early morning shade and you get more early afternoon shade. And that's the key, is trying to stay where you do have some shadows or some wind to catch them the best on a rock crawler when you don't have, you know, the perfect conditions with off-color water.
Pete wants to know about the hooks. That's not a bait you mess around with a bunch of different hooks on, is it?
Well, it's not necessarily a bait I mess with a different style of hooks, but I do change the size of hooks. A lot of my rock crawlers, you know, when they come out of the package, they've got standard number 5, just round bend gamakatsus. There are occasions that I'll go to a 2X strong gamakatsu. If I want to slow the speed of the floating on the bait, I'll actually go to a 2X strong version. I will upsize generally to a number 4 on the front when I want to upsize hooks. There's times that I actually will put a number 6 on the back, and it actually makes the bait wiggle a little bit different when you start playing with changing the hook sizes. But when it comes straight down to it, I pretty much always throw just the round bend. I just really believe that for those days that fish may not be eating a bait good, that they'll get a round bend hook better than they will an EWG style. And to me, a round bend, you know, light wire gamakatsus is as good a hook as you can put on them. You know, Aaron's G-Finesse treble hook is a great hook to replace the hooks on a rock crawler. And you have to replace hooks, because when you get that bait down and grind it around in the rocks, you're going to dull some points. So you got to be conscious of keeping your hooks sharp, but round bend's pretty much the way I go.
All right, let's give up one more little trick. We need to give the McStick a little bit more love. And you showed something there, and it went past a lot of people. But then we'll let you go. I think you have some company there. I really appreciate it.
And
over an hour with it. But
yeah, McSticks, you were asking about some of the early prototypes. I mean, this was actually one of the very original McStick 95 prototypes. I mean, you can see it's just, this was actually the first hand-built bait that they did of the 95. It's actually, the plastic is, you know, whatever plastic they used to hand build a bait. And you can see that it did have the weight transfer system in it. I think you can see that weight transfer moving in the bait. And those were the things that we were trying to work out. And then a lot of times the bait would go to, you know, a clear version where you could actually see all of the internal parts and components of the bait. And typically when we would get to the phase of really testing the bait, we would go to something really, really bright so you could see the bait in clear water situations to make sure the action and everything was right. So, you know, the baits went through a lot of different phases. When you start talking about a McStick, there are a lot of things that I do to play with McSticks. I actually am going to upsize the hooks frequently on a McStick. I want to upsize to a 4 or a 5 or a 4 in a lot of occasions. And I definitely use 2X strong hooks a lot when it comes to throwing a McStick. I want to get that bait to perfectly suspending or even slightly sinking a little bit. And there's a lot of little things you can do. You can add extra split rings to give the bait a little bit more weight. You can see on this bait, I've actually got an extra split ring hanging off the backside of this front hook right there. And just little tricks like that is what I do to make sure the bait's suspended the way I want it to suspend.
And suspend is based upon your sea level, the temperature of the water, the density of the water. There's no way you can ever get any bait that 100% suspends coast to coast. So it's always better to have a bait that would always float a little, that you have to add a little bit of weight to, than a bait that always sinks, because once it always sinks, you can't ever make it float, right?
Exactly. And that's the big key to being successful throwing a stick bait, especially in colder water situations, is being able to make sure that bait is suspending so you can keep the bait in the strike zone in front of the fish longer. So many guys take a stick bait out of the package. They never even inspect what it's doing, but that's going to be the first thing I do. When I pull a bait out of the package, I throw it 5 feet from the boat, pull it under the water, give it slack. And if that bait floats a little bit, I'm going to add weight to it anytime I'm fishing that bait in the early spring or fall.
Anything else, Mike?
Man, I don't know what it would be, Matt. It's just, it's awesome to be on the show. It's awesome to have Andy's Frozen Custard in my corner this year. We're super excited. And don't forget to go to my Facebook, Mike McClellan, Professional Angler. Look up the video, follow the link to register for the Yum Squad, and go for your chance to win free custard for a year. I mean, I know you've got Andy's location's right there close to you.
Oh, yeah, I go all the time. I get the Sunday. I'm just a fan of the straight Sunday. Andy's. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So, and there's so many cool things that we're going to be doing this year with Andy's. I've actually committed to them that I'm going to be doing. So any of your fans that are watching, especially some of the younger fans, we're going to do what we call the Andy's Frozen Custard Cam this year. We're going to do some impromptu videos on tournament sites, weigh-ins, where basically I'm going to be coming to, fans in the crowd. A lot of times I'm going to try to pick out some of the younger anglers, come to them with the Andy's Frozen Custard Cam and talk about favorite flavors, maybe your favorite fishing style, just a lot of different things. And you never know what's going to come out of this Andy's Frozen Custard deal when we're on site. Definitely going to be carrying some Andy's Frozen Custard little snack packs to be hanging out in the campground and enjoying some Andy's Frozen Custard as we're on the road as well.
That's awesome. Thanks for taking the time. Like I said, that probably went a little bit longer than you expected, but you brought all the goods. And then once you start showing stuff and talking about it, and then you agree to take some tips and tactics, then who knows what wormhole that's going to go down to. But I learned some stuff about it, so thank you for being open. Congratulations on the new gig, the boat, the truck. The wrap looks good. You'll be kicking off the season here in what, a week?
2 weeks.
Week and a half? 2 weeks?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
All right.
2 weeks from today. Practice starts for the first pro circuit event on Sam Raider.
Well, good luck, Mike.
Thank you, man.
Take care. That was Mike McClellan, known him for a long time. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We are going to take our final break, come back, kind of put a wrap on everything that we've done for the show. Look ahead towards the remainder of the week. So we will be back BTL on a Monday.
Combining one of the most popular hook styles with Gamakatsu's beefier Superline offering, the Gamakatsu Superline Offset Round Bend delivers the strength necessary to target big fish in heavy cover. Well suited for braided line and heavier fluorocarbon, the Gamakatsu Superline Offset Round Bend is built using stronger Superline wire that allows anglers to easily fish a finesse worm around heavy cover. The round bend offers a larger bite area, perfect for any worm presentation, while increasing your hookup ratios. The newly enhanced Z-bend holds your plastics on the hook longer, reducing the number of pull-offs and reducing damage to plastics. Available in 2/0, 3/0, 4/0, and 5/0, this is the most durable worm hook, designed for heavier lines that hold your bait on longer.
Preparation is key to success. And that preparation starts well before you ever hit the water. You're only as strong as your connection to the fish, and your line is that critical connection. Confidence in your line every minute, every day on the water is a necessity, and failure, it's not an option. Sunline makes the fluorocarbon, nylon, and braided lines to give you the strength to guarantee your confidence.
One of the cool new jig heads that Big Bite came out with is the ram head, named after the golden ram cliff perch, and it's really designed specifically for the Ned style. But one of the cool things about this jig head and the Gamakatsu hook that Big Bite put in it, especially in the 3/16 ounce model, is how versatile it is. You can actually rig it 4 or 5 different ways instead of having to go through a myriad of different jig heads. This will get the job done. A bunch of different jig heads. You can actually very efficiently get the job done with the new ram head. The Spro Little John crankbait has been around for almost 15 years, and it is one of my go-to crankbaits whenever I need a fish in the boat, so you can never have enough new colors. That's why Spro's coming out with a handful of new colors, including Pearl Shad, which has this bleached out white look, but it's got this pearlescent, really pretty. We've got Copper Shad, which looks amazing in the water. It's got that purple flake on the back, really pops in the water. And then if you want some real pop, we've got Sparkle Shad, nothing but sparkles all over this thing. And then last but not least, we've got the matte Sexy Shad, just a really different looking color for a crankbait. So you want to give them a little different look, that matte Sexy Shad is definitely the one to go with. All these colors are available in the original Little John and the MD.
Elite Series Pro Daryl Gleason here. My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
What's up, Bass Talk Live fans? Brandon Polnick here. And ever since I won a couple Bassmaster Elite Series events on X-Zone Lures, I've been getting a bunch of questions of what makes them so special and different. And really, the truth is, it's in the details. The little details, things like no cheap fillers in their plastic. That gives you more lifelike action, more realistic and vibrant colors. But don't just take my word for it. Go to www.xzonelures.com and check them out for yourself.
Welcome back to BTL on Monday, January 17th, kind of closing out the show. Like I teased at the beginning of the show, we have an interesting first caller on Tuesday's show. Brandon Burke's going to talk about his 8.36-pound pending world record, Mean Mouth. I guess they have to make sure it's not like actually just a smallmouth or just a spot or whatever, but pumping out some giants down there in Texas. And then Thursday, I also want to bring up is our 50th episode of Day 4 with Uncle Frank. So all sorts of special stuff going on there. Big shout out, big thanks to Mike McClellan for joining us today. You know, I don't think a lot of people realize, but I think he is just recently, over this past year, joined the 300 Club, his 300 professional bass tournaments over the course of his career, the majority being with bass, but over 50 there with the with MLF. And we were talking a little bit off air. We didn't even get into the tournament season, the tournament schedule. Obviously very busy fishing. I think there's 5 this year on the pro circuit, as well as all of the BPT stops. So 12, 13 tournaments on his schedule. But that pro circuit stops, especially the first couple of the year, including the one in Florida where he does have a win in, and then has become really strong up on the St. Lawrence River with some solid finishes there. So coming off a top 10 finish in 2021 on the pro circuit, and still kind of trying to find his feet in the, I mean, for the guy who's one of, I would consider, top 5 most consistent anglers over the past couple decades. Like I put him in that KVD, Todd Faircloth, Brian Thrift as far as cashing checks mode. Hasn't been able to do like consecutively on the BPT, but had a couple, I think 2 11th place finishes on the BPT this past year, and some other success. So that's what we got for Monday on BTL. And like I said, I liked getting into kind of the nitty gritty, the stuff with Mike there, kind of how it developed, how the rock crawler developed. Got a lot of good feedback from the Battery Show with Matt Looney, where he kind of went into the nitty-gritty behind the scenes. So going to try to kind of dive into that as we progress here in the 2022 season of Bass Talk Live. But that's all we got for a Monday. We will see you guys tomorrow.